Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about Valorant, and if you play Valorant, it may not be worth using the chat feature unless you want to be chat restricted. I mean, this person typed in GGWP and got chat restricted. For those who may not be aware, GGWP stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or Good Game Well Played. Now, this specific chat restriction lasted for about 24 hours, and Riot says, since your penalty will expire in less time than it would take us to investigate an appeal, and you have no other penalties for this game, we're going to let the restriction run its course. So there's no way to dispute this, all for saying GGWP, well, GGWP Riot. However, there may be more to this story, so Riot Game Support says, hey, we know this was confusing. You received a penalty for voice comms, not your chat history. Our automated support response doesn't yet surface voice comms transcript evidence, but we're working on it. One of our support agents has already sent you the voice comms transcript showing why we penalized your account, and we won't be overturning it. To be honest with you, I don't really believe Riot here. I mean, sure, maybe their system doesn't have the ability to print voice transcript within these notices, but at the same time, they shouldn't be sending out notices with incorrect or completely wrong information. I mean, this is misleading if this is not the case. Why not just say, you know what, it was because of voice chat, as opposed to saying in-game chat and quoting something that is completely irrelevant to the reason that they were chat restricted. I don't know about this one. I'm certain here there's an excuse or some sort of reason, but let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. Next up, we're quickly talking about Pokemon versus Palworld. So in yesterday's video, we talked about Nintendo's lawsuit against Pocket Pair, who makes Palworld. And it was about patent infringements, not copyright infringements, none of that. And a lot of people are wondering, what patents did Palworld violate? Was it from an update? Was it from something initially? Was it from something that Nintendo just had patented? A lot of people don't know. And we still won't know until we get full details of the court case. But Video Game Esoterica has a pretty good insight as to what they think is the exact problem here, and they've got experience in this stuff. So if you've seen this video, let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Like everything I talk about, the link will be in the description below. My news is 100% open source. I don't hide my sources. And everything I talk about, the link will always be in the description right at the very bottom. Anyways, here the big reason is obviously money, but there are some interesting nuances. Now, some of the comments on this video are pretty interesting. I mean, this person says no matter how they try to slow down Palworld, they'll never be as slow as the Pokemon Company. And completely bonkers what you can patent when it comes to game mechanics. No wonder why there is so little innovation nowadays. Now, if this lawsuit fails, I'm very curious to see if Pokemon goes after Palworld for copying Pokemon characters. I mean, they just recently won a $15 million copyright lawsuit against Pocket Monster Reissue, which apparently copied Pokemon characters. Next up, we're talking about Retrom. Now, Retrom is pretty new, but it's got a pretty cool idea. It's basically a self-hosted ROM cloud service. So if you've got a big library of ROMs, Retrom may be worth checking out. I mean, they say right here, Retrom is a centralized game library management service that allows you to host your games on a single device and connect clients on any amount of other devices to install, uninstall, download, and subsequently launch said games locally. And they say it is under heavy development. Expect breaking changes often, update your installations with care. Now, for full transparency, I haven't checked out Retrom yet, but it's looking pretty nice based on these screenshots. I mean, if someone's got a whole bunch of ROMs and they wanted just to self-host them and connect to them with a device later on, I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, to have one spot on one PC and just basically shared across your devices makes a ton of sense. Let me know your thoughts about Retrom in the comments below. At the time of filming, Retrom version 0.0.80 is the latest update. It was released at the end of July and it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Next up, we're talking about Sega. And for those who may not be aware, September 19th, which was yesterday, was International Talk Like a Pirate Day. And Sega missed that day and unveiled Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii today. This game features Goro Majima. It's a successor to Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. It's releasing on February 28th of 2025, and it is going to be an action-adventure game, not an RPG. It's headed to the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S, and yes, PC. And I'm surprised in 2025 we're still getting PS4 games and even Xbox One games. That's amazing. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. The trailer looks super interesting. The gameplay looks super interesting, and I think this one's going to be a big hit. I'm already a fan of it. Next up, we're talking about PlayStation, and Sony seems to know the secret ingredient to attract people to its brand new console here, the PS5 Pro, that received a little bit of negative press online, or at least a little bit of negative reaction. Anyways, they've released a brand new colorway here to celebrate their 30th anniversary, and I think this colorway looks absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, the 30th anniversary collection stuff is going to be sold in highly limited quantity, so good luck getting your hands on something here. I mean, I think they're limited to something like 12,300 each. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. Would you be tempted to pick up a PS5 Pro if you were kind of on the fence about one and could get one in this colorway? Would you pick up a PS5 because it's in this colorway? Would you pick up a PS Portal if it was in this colorway? Or would you try for one of the controllers? To be honest with you, I don't know if I'm going to pick up anything here. Maybe the DualSense controller, but at the same time, maybe not. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know if I was clear enough earlier, the 12,300 limited supply I think applies to the PS5 Pro bundles, and each one will be numbered, and I'm not certain if that applies to the individual controllers and the other stuff, but I'm hoping it doesn't, but who knows here. Anyways, the pre-orders start on September 26th, and well, let me know your thoughts about all this. Next up, we're talking about Netflix, and Netflix has just dropped a handful of trailers here for TV shows based on video games. The first one is for Tomb Raider: The Legend of Lara Croft. The second one here is Splinter Cell: Death Watch. The third one here is Devil May Cry. And the fourth one here is Netflix and CDPR and Cyberpunk. I've taken a look at all of the trailers, and to me, Devil May Cry stands out as something I may actually watch. It looks very interesting. If you've seen these trailers, let me know your thoughts about them in the comments below and if any of these shows interest you. Next up, we're talking about the arguably ill-fated Concord, and Concord may have received a big blow here, or maybe this opens the door to possibly make some changes and make the game more successful. Ryan Ellis, the director of Concord, has reportedly stepped down. For those who may be unaware, Ryan Ellis was the creative director for Destiny 2. So according to Kotaku, Ryan Ellis told staff at Firewalk last week that he would be stepping down from his game director role and move into a support role instead. So it doesn't seem like he's leaving the game entirely, just from a role that calls the shots. Let me know your thoughts about this one, if this is going to open the door to possibly make Concord successful. Next up, we're talking about Proton, and if you game on the Steam Deck or just Linux in general, you'll probably like this news. Proton 9.0-3 just dropped, and a whole bunch of games are now listed as playable. These games were previously playable in Proton Experimental, but now on the mainline build. And one of them is one of my favorites here, and that is the King of Fighters 13 Steam Edition. Additionally, there were a whole bunch of fixes and improvements for a whole bunch of different games. If you do play on Linux, you'll probably want to make sure that Proton stays updated. I mean, even Proton Experimental got a brand new release, and we've got a whole bunch of games now listed as playable, including Total War Shogun 2, Welcome to Dusttown, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, and even more. They fixed multiplayer in Spellforce 3. They fixed mod support in Doom Eternal and fixed Yakuza 6 crash when trying playing Puyo Puyo minigame. And speaking about Linux stuff, next up we're talking about Windows and Linux, and also possible gaming improvements in the near future, or far future, just in the future. DirectX is adopting SPRV as the interchange format of the future, and this is an announcement right from Microsoft. Now, this document is highly technical, so I'll try to sum it up at a very high level here, and let me know if I'm wrong about this. But basically, the way I'm understanding this is it may be easier to bring games over to Linux, or at least make them work on Linux in the future. I could be wrong, but it looks like Microsoft is more supporting of open source stuff. And speaking about open source stuff, next up we're talking about GNOME, or GNOME as more and more people end up calling it. GNOME 47 just dropped. It's the latest update here for this desktop environment. It's supposed to be faster, snappier, render things a little bit better and quicker, and also be a little bit more customizable. No doubt here we're going to see more and more Linux distributions update their GNOME to GNOME 47, provided they're using it. Anyways, they call this one Denver. There's going to be accent colors and even more, and they've got a very detailed list of the changes and improvements over on their website. Now, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of GNOME because I usually find it resource heavy, but at the same time here, it's looking really nice. I can't deny that. Next up, we're talking about Samsung, and Samsung may not be having the best week. They were just hit with a whopping $192 million fine for infringing on wireless charging patents. If I'm not mistaken, the lawsuit was launched in 2022, so it's been a couple of years in the process. But Samsung lost the case. Now, from my understanding, back in 2013, there were talks between Samsung and Mojo Mobility, and the talks were for Samsung to license Mojo Mobility's technology for some wireless charging stuff. And then those talks fell through, there was never a deal agreed upon, and Samsung, I guess, went ahead and used that tech anyway, and now they're paying for it. Next up, we're talking about Qualcomm, and it turns out that Qualcomm is following the trend of a whole lot of other companies by laying off people. Qualcomm is reportedly laying off 226 people, and that's in addition to the over 1,250 people they laid off in 2023, all while making revenues of over $35 billion. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly who is being cut here, whether it's the decision maker executive level or it's rather the people doing the work of the decisions at the bottom. My gut tells me it's the workers at the bottom doing the work, and they're going to expect more people to do more with less. I don't know what's going on here, but it just seems like it's a similar trend, where if a company isn't doing great and they got to make money, they cut the working people and keep the executives, the ones who have made the decisions in the first place to bring the company to where it is. But moving on from that, and next up, we're talking about WonderSwan emulation on the Game Boy Advance. Yes, that's a thing now with Swan GBA. So Swan GBA version 0.6.6 just dropped. It is a WonderSwan emulator on the Game Boy Advance. At the time of filming, the developer here says there are 2 games that have serious problems and a handful here that have some visual glitches. Overall, I'm surprised by the release of this and very impressed with it. If you play emulators on your Game Boy Advance, let me know in the comments below your experience and your thoughts about this one. Next up, if you're a fan of Microsoft Flight Simulator but not a fan of how much storage this game takes up or how big the updates are, you might be a big fan of this news provided you have a decent internet connection. It's being reported that Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 will have a very small install footprint, something to the tune of 30 gigs. And that's thanks to a hybrid approach where the maps and everything will be streamed from the cloud. So they say right here in the press release, by tapping into the latest cloud streaming technology, installation size has been trimmed down to about 30 gigs to get you in your seat and flying as quickly as possible. And they do this by streaming in the higher detailed areas that are only necessary for your flight path. Why install all the data for the United States when you're intending just to fly over Europe for the evening? I mean, maybe that's how some people play, but for me, I just kind of fly all over the place. What worries me about this approach is basically for people like me who don't play the game traditionally or properly and just literally fly all over the place and do random things. I'm hoping here that there's going to be an option to download more than just the direct flight path, or that's going to be a bit of a bummer. Let me know your thoughts about this approach in the comments below. Do you think it's good that this hybrid cloud experience is being implemented as opposed to the entire game being run from the cloud? Do you think just streaming assets is a smart idea and a good way to tackle big install sizes? And continuing to speak about Microsoft, next up we're talking about Microsoft and their ambassador program. If you're a member of their ambassador program, you're not going to like this news. They're shutting it down after 13 years. So they say here, today we are announcing the final season of the Xbox Ambassadors program as we continue to integrate its values across our platform and focus on creating more ways for you to directly influence and impact Xbox for all. And the program is shutting down on October 15th. Now, I'm not an Xbox ambassador, so I'm not impacted by this, but if you are, it says here you have until October 15th to use your tickets or codes or rewards, so just be mindful of that date. And speaking about heads up, next up we're talking about Anker. And if you've got an Anker power bank, you may want to pay attention to this because they've issued a recall for a bunch of power banks due to fire safety. So Anker is saying that this applies to A1642, A1647, and A1652 batteries. And it's from a batch used in the products from January 3rd of this year to September 17th of this year. If you do have an Anker power bank, I recommend checking out this website just to be sure. It tells you how to identify the power banks, what to do, and what are the next steps. And last up here, we're talking about Pico 8 emulation on Android with P8 Go. It's a brand new app for Android that, yes, emulates Pico 8 games. This was released just this month, and it says here in the description, it gives you instant access to over 7,000 plus retro-style Pico 8 8 games with no downloads or ads. This app does have controller support. You can play with a touchscreen, you can play in landscape or portrait mode. And I'm very happy to see a new Pico 8 emulator surface on Android. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.